And now we're going to turn to another wipeout on Wall Street, part of a steep slide that's seen the Dow Jones drop over 4,000 points since the beginning of the year. And while the Dow goes down, gas prices keep going up.
Gas prices hit a new record high nationwide this morning. The national average $4.37 a gallon. That is after prices peaked in March during Russia's invasion into Ukraine. The U.S. pursued extraordinary measures at the time, releasing oil emergency amounts and record amounts of oil from our strategic petroleum reserves. That sent prices lower for a time, but now they are back climbing, with the key driver of gasoline prices, oil, also climbing now back above $100 a barrel. And as Michael says, this has sent the stock market tumbling. In the last couple of days, we've seen dramatic shifts in investor sentiment and volatility. You've seen the S&P 500 down about 3%, and so far this year, Michael, we've seen stocks, the S&P 500, which is the thing in most people's retirement savings accounts, down now almost 17%.
America are hurting because of inflation. I understand what it feels like. I come from a family where when the price of gas or food went up, we felt it. It was a discussion at the kitchen table. I want every American to know that I'm taking inflation very seriously, and it's my top domestic priority.
Stearns was in a death spiral, and the Fed brokered its sale.
The worst financial crisis in modern times. Certainly the largest financial disaster in decades in this country, and perhaps the end of an era in American business.
This year of 2022 is turning out to be a true year of transition. Since they declared that the pandemic was over, there has been no letting up of negative news. In February, the war in Ukraine began, which prompted the beginning of challenge to the current world order. And right after this, the Fed followed through with this planned rate hike that they continued this month in May, trying to slow down the economy. Through all of this, we have been experiencing higher inflation on everything since last year. But it's now becoming more noticeable as gas prices reach record highs and food is costing more than ever. We have President Biden making speeches blaming everyone he can for inflation, from Putin to COVID to supply chain issues, etc.
I want us to be crystal clear about the problem. There are two leading causes of inflation we're seeing today. The first cause of inflation is a once-in-a-century pandemic. And this year we have a second cause, Mr. Putin's war in Ukraine.
He completely ignored the fact that his policies and Trump's and Obama's of money printing and borrowing of debt is actually the main reason for the inflation that we are experiencing. I watched him speak on Tuesday, and he said a whole lot while not really saying anything at all. They just used him at the platform saying a lot of words and added subtle mind control, putting two phrases in back of him which would speak to the subconscious of all his loyal mind-controlled subjects. They said, Biden is tackling inflation and lowering cost. I mean, if you really understand how their mind control works, that is such manipulation, because he isn't doing anything of the sort. During these times, as I speak with random people and I listen to how they feel about these times that we're in, I have found that reality still has not caught up with most. And while they see that bad things are happening, like the market is going down and inflation is really up, their tap on reality is still not there. They are just sitting with ignorant, blind optimism that tells them what they are going to do is wait things out and get back to their lives when things actually get better. I mean, I guess I understand that mentality, because markets do run in cycles. We have highs and we have lows, bull markets and bear markets. And the easiest thing for people to do is to continue to think optimistically than to look at things from what they view as just overly negative and pessimistic. Even if it is reality, it doesn't matter. But make no mistake, it is important that you live in reality and are not so blinded by the lies and the distractions that you are not fully able to understand what is actually happening. Be very clear and understand that the collapse is happening, and we are walking straight down into a very deep hole. It is important that you understand that the crash has begun, and all of those plans that people have been working towards are no longer valid. It is highly important that you live in the reality that actually exists, and not in a dream world that allows you to keep holding on to dreams and goals that do not matter. It's hard to tell someone that the things that they have been working on don't really matter. But you must really live in full reality. We must be preparing for judgment. We must prepare for chaos. This time in our lives is not about getting our financial houses in order. This time that we're in is more about getting our spiritual houses in order. But most people can't see that. It's time that you really understand that your money does not matter. In a very short time, you will lose it all. And the only one you will have to rely on is the Most High. But if it is at that time you choose to think on Him and focus on Him, it may be too late for you. It's time to wake up to our economic reality. Let's begin. Okay, so these messages can be very difficult to make because the real importance of this topic cannot be understated. And like I just said earlier, this type of message is also something hard to deliver to people because you don't want to be the person that is taking away their hope. I have older children, and I do understand how it is. You don't want them to not have hope or not to believe in a future. But the actual problem is not the message. The problem can be what their hope is based on and what the future is all about. And the truth is that people often don't like hearing that what they are focusing on doesn't matter. It's like the college student that is putting everything into their college degree because that's what they think they have to do to succeed. But because they don't know anything about economic realities or geopolitical events, they're putting their focus into a goal that will not bring them anything. This is why there are young adults who never went to college that are making more than their peers who actually got college degrees. It's because they focused on a skill and not on doing what the system told them to do. You see, it's about what you put your focus on. And if it is aligned with reality, you have a better chance of making it through the hard times. So like I said, it's all about what you're placing your hope and future on. And the problem why many people's futures are hopeless is because of what the majority of them have placed their hope in, which is why these messages are so hard for people to really understand and accept. You see this right here? This is what people have placed their hopes and trust in. The more people have of this, or the less they have of it, basically determines their level of happiness and success in life. And because it is this piece of paper that is going away, for the ones that have made this piece of paper their major goal of life, it's why a message like this feels so negative to them. Now, I've been making videos about this subject for some time now, trying to prepare people for this reality. I have always thought that if people really just understood how much this money they are chasing didn't even matter, and that it was going away, it would help people move away from the love and attachment to it, and they would turn to the only one that does matter. But for many people that I have personally delivered this message to, they still are not able to fully attach to the full reality, and therefore they're still tied to the sinking ship. Understand that the crash has begun, but it is being controlled at this point, allowing the people at the top to liquidate their holdings, while at the same time they drive down the price of the real asset they are going into, which will then change everything. And that real asset that I'm speaking of is Bitcoin and other major cryptocurrencies. Make no mistake, the crash has begun, but the bubble hasn't popped. And maybe that doesn't make sense now, but hopefully at the end of this video, it will make more sense to you. In order to really understand this, we first need to talk about the markets, because the news media is really so light in their coverage of this whole thing. But it's so very important to understand what has happened in the financial markets. The first thing to understand is that this major market decline that we're in right now is all planned and manufactured. They aren't even shying away from it all, and they have created the perfect scapegoat for it by blaming inflation. I mean, it would be pretty idiotic if these people who are running the government and controlling the currency didn't understand simple economics about supply and demand. Understanding that when you increase the supply of something, while demand is steady or even decreasing, you are lowering the value of that asset. And that is pretty easy fundamentals to understand when reviewing the dollar. They have been printing and printing and printing money for the past decade, borrowing massive amounts of money for decades. We are talking about excessive borrowing and printing through 4 presidents: Bush, Obama, Trump, and now Biden. All of them guilty of this problem, none less responsible than the other. This problem has been brewing ever since they tried to fix the last problem. In the last crash in 2008, when we saw the Great Recession, do you understand how we got out of it? It was the same remedy that they used when COVID came on the scene.
It says it's slashing its benchmark interest rate to 0 and launching a massive $700 billion quantitative easing program to shelter the American economy.
Yeah, they printed trillions of dollars and pumped the economy with dollars to stimulate the economy, adding massive debt to our financial system. Now, please understand, when I'm speaking on this, I am speaking of the United States economy, which at this time is the most important financial system because of the role of the dollar. But this is not just special to the United States. The world economy as a whole engaged in this money printing and low rates, specifically speaking in terms to the European Union and Japan, while China always maintained a certain pegged value to the dollar, which allowed them to sell the United States their products at a low cost. What I'm saying is that since the Great Recession, where they were about to call it financial Armageddon, the answer to the financial problems was simply to print money and lower rates to 0, so the country can take on as much debt as possible, which would stimulate economic activity. So by the end of 2008, after they engaged in the bank bailouts and the first round of quantitative easing, when Barack Obama began his presidency, the United States debt was at $10 trillion. And the money supply, now let me explain what the money supply is first. The money supply is the total amount of money, cash, coins, and balances in bank accounts that is in circulation. It is the amount of US dollars in circulation. According to Federal Reserve charts, the money supply at the end of 2008 was $1,595 billion, or $1.59 trillion. So in 2008, the debt was at $10 trillion and the money supply was at $1.59 trillion. Now, after 13 plus years of quantitative easing and record low rates at 0 for more than a decade, in this year 2022, the United States debt is now at $30 trillion and climbing. And the money supply as of March 2022 is $20,710 billion, or $20.7 trillion. You see, in 13 years, the debt has tripled and the money supply has grown 13 times over. And that's not a coincidence. Now, maybe this is hard to understand. I know I'm just throwing numbers at you. So let me try to illustrate it. You see this stack of money? This stack of money is the amount of US dollars in circulation in 2008, let's say. This is 1.59 trillion. Now, over 13 years since the Great Recession, the amount of money now in circulation is now 13 times, count them, 13 times more in circulation. The supply of our money was consistently increasing. Please understand, this is not normal economic behavior, and it's highly dangerous for any economy. But even more dangerous than it is for the economy, it is extremely bad for a currency that is especially the world reserve currency. Since the Great Recession, they strongly devalued the United States currency, and during COVID, they used the pandemic as an excuse to go to the extreme, which is why if you look at this chart, you see the spike in 2020. But listen, I know most of you aren't in finance and economics. I threw a lot of numbers and technicals at you. Honestly, these are some of the topics that we should all understand, but they don't teach us in our schools. Like, if you want a population to thrive, why wouldn't you teach it how to preserve its wealth and handle money? Anyways, through that explanation, I hope you got the picture of what they did. And believe me, it's way worse than I ever explained here. I didn't even really cover the debt and speculation, like the gambling on the markets. But you honestly don't need to go so deep to understand this. The point of you seeing this is to understand that it is very obvious that inflation was going to be unleashed when you have a spike in the money supply the way we did. I mean, they really started the problem with the money printing when they started with the bank bailouts, the auto bailouts, and all the quantitative easing. But then they went on steroids during COVID. Again, just look at the spike in the chart. What you're looking at is the value of the currency being devalued drastically. So for inflation to be a shock to these people is not true. But the news had us focusing on supply chain issues and COVID, and now it's Putin.
I want us to be crystal clear about the problem. There are two leading causes of inflation we're seeing today. The first cause of inflation is a once-in-a-century pandemic. And this year we have a second cause. Mr. Putin's war in Ukraine.
But if we just understood how to look at our money, we would understand that a problem was on the way long time before. That's the crazy thing about our society. We have been made to be completely money hungry. Our population as a whole only desire is towards the ability of gaining wealth. But other than how much money is in our accounts and what our credit score are, most people don't know the first thing about the money that they have tied their entire life to attaining. People sacrificing and giving their lives up to something that means nothing. We believe it means something, and so it does. So like I was explaining, we got to this point because the Fed and the United States government since 2008 have been artificially manipulating our economic system by pumping it full of money and lending at pretty much zero cost of interest for banks. And we are at a time where this is a tremendous amount of dollars that are in circulation, but not enough demand for the usage of those dollars. It's supply and demand. So now what the Fed has started to do is pump the brakes on the manipulation. And they're trying to slow down economic activity because no one really knows what anything costs anymore. You see, what I mean by that is you don't really know what the houses are worth. You don't really know what the value of food is. We don't know what the value of crypto is. We don't know what the value of labor is. Why we don't know is because we don't really know what the value of the dollar is, what the value of fiat currencies are. So what the Fed is doing right now is they're raising rates, which they are saying they will be doing every meeting. They'll be doing it by at least 50 points or 0.5% each meeting. The next meeting is just 1 month away on June 14th, where they'll be raising rates again. Understand, in January, we were at 0, and now we're at 0.75. And the rate is expected to be at 1.9% by the end of the year. That's aggressive. By raising rates, the Fed is trying to bring back real price discovery and trying to allow the markets to work themselves out. And this is what I want you to understand during the season that we're in. What is happening is intentional. This is something that you can plan for because it is something that they are telling you will happen. It's not like this decline is not being communicated. It's just because the news hasn't told the people to prepare. It's why people are not. When the news told everyone there is a virus and everyone needs to wear a mask and stay 6 feet away from each other, parents didn't see their own children for months. So imagine if the news actually prepared the public for what raising rates look like for the economy. You do know that they tried this before recently with raising rates. In 2015, we saw the first rate hike of 1/4 point, and then they raised the rates gradually by 1/4% from 2016 to 2018, until the rate got to 2 1/4. That held for about 6 months.
That is the bell at the New York Stock Exchange there as the market comes to a close, plunging at latest count more than 1,100 points. At worst, during the day, it was down some 1,500 points. The Dow's worst week now in more than 2 years.
Until in June of 2019, the stock market started falling and economic activity was really weakening, and they started to lower rates. Until February 2020, they dropped rates back to 0 because of COVID, as they said. You see, the economy wasn't able to handle that gradual rate hike even then, and the U.S. had less debt to service than today. If you look at the history of the Fed funds interest rates, you can see how they have been forced over time to cut interest rates because they have printed so much more money and taken on so much more debt. So if anyone wants to say that this view about the crash beginning is just negative, the proof is right in the charts. And what they are doing right now is far more aggressive than what they were doing pre-COVID. But unfortunately, the public won't understand because they have blind trust of their officials.
Most people, the vast majority of Americans, are hoping that their government just takes care of the problem and they don't have to think about it in detail at the kitchen table or at the dinner table. And that's understandable no matter what their background.
What people are doing, I guess, is that they are just trusting that these people know what they are doing, that the Fed and the government actually know what they're doing. The Fed and the media keep throwing out the word soft landing, which means raising rates without a major economic event. It's just a way of providing people with hope that allows them to not take things too seriously. But the thing is that while they are mentioning the hope of a soft landing, they are also throwing out the word recession as well. And that is highly more likely than a soft landing. But the real drama in the markets hasn't really hit yet, so people still haven't really stepped into reality of what has happened in these markets. Like for instance, while people were discussing Elon Musk buying Twitter, and this is being shared all over social media, the NASDAQ, which is basically the stock exchange for our technology companies. Year to date, the NASDAQ, since the beginning of January, is down 25% for the year. 25%. In just 5 months, the index lost a quarter of its value. Next, you'll see that the S&P 500, the stock index that contains the 500 largest companies in the United States, this index is down 15% for the year. And the Dow Jones Industrial, which measures the daily price movements of 30 large American companies on the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, is not an average that should be followed as much as the S&P or even the NASDAQ. But because of its high number, it's the biggest index most retail investors follow. But the Dow is down 11% for the year. Major companies in our world are collapsing in value. Year to date, Netflix is down 70%. 70%. Amazon is down 35%. Tesla down 25%. Facebook, now known as Meta, down 40%. Do you see it? This is only 5 months of trading. These stocks are crashing, but it's happening very quietly. This is a very quiet market correction that hasn't gotten the true buzz of the general public yet. I mean, people might know about it, but because the media isn't raising any alarm bells, no one is panicking yet, or even really considering what is actually happening. But the truth is that the real pain hasn't set in yet. I said earlier that the crash has begun, but the bubble hasn't popped yet. And maybe you didn't understand that. You see, this slide in the market that is happening right now is just about the first recalibration that is allowing the super rich to get out of their positions quietly. They are also driving down the price of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin right now, all in a method to show the extreme volatility of the asset while giving the rich the time to quietly move in with the money that is coming out of the market. We have been watching them transition their wealth while they keep us continuously distracted. This time period that we are in is the quiet transition of wealth while also locking people into their economic social class. For a bigger picture, it's also important to understand that this is not just a decline in the United States, but it's happening worldwide. The Nikkei index, that's Japan's stock market, is down almost 10% year to date. The Hang Seng index in Hong Kong is 16% down year to date. The Shanghai Composite, a Chinese stock market, is down 16% as well. This is a worldwide occurrence because the world is heading to a worldwide economic collapse. This is not just the United States, but the whole world that will feel this. But if the news is not really explaining what is going on, why would the general public know enough to protect themselves from the shocks coming? Now, I said the bubble has not burst yet because this contraction or correction is being controlled very well and methodically, which is why the cause for panic has not happened as of yet. Trust me, when the bubble pops, you know it because it will be happening everywhere, feeding into all areas. And the bubble is not just a stock market price bubble, but a debt bubble and a currency bubble. In regards to the stock market and the time period that we're in, we are at the period of sell in May and go away, which is a way of explaining market behavior during the months of May to October. And with this, we have 2 more rate hikes coming in the next 2 months, in June and July. So there should be more volatility expected. May through July are expected to be very rocky. But aside from this, I do expect that there will be an event or something else that takes more attention away from the markets, like with this Roe vs. Wade deal or China invading Taiwan. Any of these things would sink the markets by itself and give the United States another scapegoat like Biden uses Putin today with inflation. But listen, the stock market isn't even the biggest issue. It's the bond market that requires our attention. This is the method in where the United States borrows its money from other nations and institutions. I said this in a few videos, and I will repeat it. Everyone should follow the 10-year Treasury note. When bond yields go down, it's because people are lending money. When yields go up, it's because they are wanting their money back and selling their bonds. Look at this chart. The US 10-year at the end of 2021 had a yield of 1.51%. Now if you look 5 months later, the yield has doubled. Just look at the spike in the chart. Since the Great Recession, the 10-year hasn't reached over 3.8%. And just this week, it hits 3.2%. People are selling US debt. This should always be watched and monitored because this one investment determines so many things about our economic future. And that is the summary of where we are economically. But in the grand scheme of things, what does it all mean to you, right? You see, I explained all of that because I do believe that it is important to educate people, because the more knowledge you receive empowers you to make better decisions. And you have enough information now that as we move, you know what indexes to follow, you can better follow trends and understand what is happening. What I hope you saw from all this, though, is not that the stock market is dropping, but that we are being moved into a very sharp economic decline that is being blamed on inflation. Inflation is a general increase in prices and the fall in the purchasing value of money. It basically means your money is worth less than it was yesterday. Inflation is a hidden tax that makes you have less buying power. I mean, don't get me wrong, your wages may go up incrementally. Maybe you even got a new job and making more money. But if you do not account for inflation, then you don't really know if you are doing better or not. The fact is that we are not headed to just higher inflation, but it will be stagflation. Stagflation is the problem you should be aware of in the near term. Stagflation is persistent high inflation combined with high unemployment and stagnant demand in a country's economy. Basically, it means high inflation with a slowing economy and less jobs. And this is what is heading our way. The value of our money will be worth a lot less while economic activity will start slowing. And because of that, people will be losing jobs. So listen, it's important that you're preparing for hard times ahead. One big way that they operate against us is by keeping the public distracted and unaware, making them live by blind optimism. And then, when problems arise, however they want to frame things, people just fall in line with their agenda. You should always expect another scapegoat, because as you can see, the government is not looking to take any blame. When you listen to Biden's speech this week on inflation, he spoke so confidently in blaming everything and everyone else besides himself. Putin's price hikes. We're in this because of the pandemic. Blah, blah, blah. And the people on all sides, whether it is Democrat or Republican, just listen. Now, there are many that don't agree with him. Even Democrats are saying they don't believe he's doing much on inflation. But the truth of the matter is that there is not much more that he can do. Spending and printing more money just makes things worse. And not spending, cutting spending, just accelerates the slowdown and the crash. So looking for the government to fix this problem of inflation makes no sense. The currency needs to be controlled. I used to believe that this crash would happen similarly to what happened in 2008. But it does not seem like that is the main agenda. It seems that there is an overall event they are waiting for in order to fully reset everything. In the United States, it is more than a financial collapse here that will disrupt everything. We have a civil war brewing that everyone should be expectant of. We have the geopolitical events happening that will bring war. We should still be expecting China to make a move on Taiwan. But above all else, there is judgment on this land of Mystery Babylon from Yah. Now for us, we cannot time any of these things, so I don't try to, and I don't recommend you trying as well. If you stay ready, you never have to get ready. We must be mentally and spiritually prepared for what is coming. At this time, as inflation gets higher, you have to really fight against it yourself with your own decisions. You're going to have to make certain lifestyle choices right now. The way you lived in the past may not be the way you can live today. You need to be living in a mindset of preparation. In the description box of this video, there is a supply list that can help you get prepared physically. Just click the link. No matter what you do, you must understand that we are in a time of preparation. We are not in a time period of growth and development. You may be the only one in your circle that is able to see what is truly happening, and I understand that can be a lot of pressure. It's easier to stay in ignorance and live like those who are walking blindly. But if you are in Yah, you are not called to be asleep, but live awake. People are just hoping for things to fix itself, and they have this view that the government will just work things out in the end.
Most people, the vast majority of Americans, are hoping that their government just takes care of the problem, and they don't have to think about it in detail at the kitchen table or at the dinner table. And that's understandable, no matter what their background.
Please do not put your heart and trust in them. Look at the back of the dollar. While it has the Eye of Horus with its proclamation of a New World Order on it, directly in the middle on the same side it says, "In God we trust." But if you understood who that God was that was on that dollar bill, you would understand who it is that they are putting their trust in. That is Satan. I have made many videos about the collapse of the dollar and all other fiat currencies. Please know that it is not a coincidence that the main problem that they're saying that we have right now is inflation.
I want every American to know that I'm taking inflation very seriously, and it's my top domestic priority.
You are naive if you think that all this talk about the collapsing of the dollar and right now having inflation problems is just a coincidence. That's naive. The problem is inflation, yes, but it's because they are collapsing the fiat currency system and these currencies no longer hold value. Our money is worthless and it's not real. And it is highly important that you do not place a high level of value around it. Please understand, money can only be a resource, but it is never and should never be your source. Right now, as inflation is spiking and gas prices are climbing, expect it to be higher this summer. Expect everything to be higher. There is way more to see with this agenda about the collapsing of the dollar. It is not something that will happen because of an economic collapse or anything like that. The collapse of the dollar is more of an international event that will then come back to hurt the United States. It happens abroad first and then happens in the States. The United States won't abandon the dollar. It's their currency. It's the rest of the world that would do so. And because the dollar is so strong right now and they are using it as a weapon, the world is already looking for alternatives around it. I mean, the United States is doing so as well, but they can't do it until the rest of the world does. That's why you keep hearing about the digital dollar. Though the dollar is strong right now, it is based on factors that show its inevitable weakness. The strength of the dollar right now is an actual weakness. It's pushing people away from it. Here's the thing. Most people today have completely trapped themselves in this mindset of chasing wealth and success. They have tied themselves to the world system that has shown them that in order for them to be successful, they must own a home and have a thriving career. People have committed themselves to a life of service to the mighty dollar that is not all that mighty. They have made the dollar their god, and they have tied their lives to its future. It is imperative that you review your focus and your goals of this life, and make sure you are not committed to the ways of this world. Everything that is happening is about resetting the world and bringing in a new way of life. What is in store for the population is very dark and very evil, and it is important that you are not attaching yourself to it. Remember what 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 10 says, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows." Make sure this is not a reference to you. Do not be covetous, and be content in the life Yah has provided for you. Covetous is having or showing a great desire to possess something belonging to someone else. And that's what marketing does completely to us all. It's because of social media and television and all these influencers that people have focused their whole life to being important or financially successful or wealthy. People have trapped themselves into searching for a life that has no meaning. We all must apply Hebrews chapter 13 verse 5 to our life when it says, "Let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have. For he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you." You must understand that our hope is in our Messiah, Yahusha. We have been guided on how we should treat money. And it is important that you abide in his truth and not tie your fate to the fate of a currency and economic system. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That's Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21. So let's be clear. This financial system is collapsing, and it will happen sooner than you think. Do not live in ignorance and tie yourself to its future. Break away your bondage from American idolatry and the principles of Mystery Babylon. This is not a time to focus on building wealth, but a time to focus on building up faith. Your relationship with the Most High is way more important than your job or your economic circumstances. I know it's difficult to ignore what the world tells you to focus on, but that is the difference between believers and the world. And we should all praise Yah that he has provided us such undeniable evidence so that we are assured we are not betting our lives on a sinking ship. Our lives must be tied to the will of the Most High, and we must make him our source. Today, fill up your lives with happiness. Fill up your life with joy and peace. Commit your life to living in service to Yah. Be his vessel. Allow him to lead your heart and guide you to what he desires for you. Allow him to direct your path. All this financial stuff is heavy, and what is coming is even heavier. If you leave it up to yourself, you're going to fall in a snare and trap. You're going to tie yourself to the fate of Babylon. Come out of her, my people, Yah says. He is warning you. He is telling us that though the situation is bleak, you must put your full trust in him. You must submit to him. That's your only choice. These people of the world will soon see that the God of money that they were serving was false, and they will then be led astray to another false god that will lead them even further away. But the people of Yah will be redeemed and enter into his kingdom. What is coming to this world will not be easy, and it is not fun watching it happen slowly and methodically. But we all must stand in praise of our Creator, that he has given us eyes to see and ears to hear. If you're living with your eyes open with discernment, we can see that this world that they are creating is not for us. And our only hope rests in our Creator, the Most High. We must live in his truth and abide in his word. We must live our life in service to him and make sure he is always our priority. Don't worry about inflation. Don't focus on it. Just prepare for it to get worse and do not be led astray by their agendas. Expect more to come and expect things to get worse. If you live mentally aware, it reduces the power of their schemes. Hold on fast to the will of the Most High and commit your life to Him, because whether you believe it or not, His kingdom is drawing nearer. Be ready for it and be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. If this has blessed you, please don't forget to like this and share it with others. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to this channel. Elohim willing, I do upload every Friday. Please don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. Thank you for watching. As always, I would like to thank all those who support and contribute to this ministry. I thank you for your love and your support. They are truly a blessing during these times that we're in. I'm thankful to know that you are blessed by this ministry, and I thank you for following Yah's call on your heart. Okay, thanks again everyone for watching. I love you all.